Boker Tov. Today's daf is daf Nun Beis. Yisomim shesamchu eitzel balabayis. In the previous Mishnah, we discussed the takanas that were made on behalf of Yisomim to protect them financially, and this is a continuation of that idea. And we have something called an apotropos. But first, the Mishnah introduces an unofficial apotropos, which means samchu, that the Yisomim relied upon so-and-so, a certain balabayis, that he will take care of all their financial dealings. He'll be nosei v'nosein on behalf of their nechasim. Once again, this is not a formal appointment of an administrator of Bezdin on behalf of Bezdin, but rather the father, before he died, he appointed an apotropos. Is chayav li aser peroseim. We'll see soon that even an unofficial apotropos is in charge of the spiritual and religious well-being of the Yisomim, and therefore they will purchase whatever they need to purchase. For example, an esrog on Sukkot or matzah on Pesach, so that they will provide for the child. And if the child could chas v'sholom eat tevel, then the apotropos is in charge of making sure that hafrasha was done to designate trumos umaisros on the peiros of the young orphans. And this was the takana to avoid any violation of tevel, chas v'sholom, on the part of the Yisomim. And we'll soon see that it's not such a simple matter to be mafresh truma on behalf of someone else. You may have to be a well-appointed formal shliach, and here we don't really have shlichus, but this was a takanas chachamim to recognize this hafrasha on behalf of the Yisomim. Apotropos shemino avi Yisomim. Now we get into another issue. When the apotropos finishes his responsibility and now hands the reins back over to the Yisomim themselves when they become mature and of age, does he have to clear his reputation, his record, by taking an oath to the effect that he did not take for himself any of the property of the Yisomim? And here we have machlokas between the Tanakama and Abba Shaul. According to the Tanakama, we differentiate in the following way between an official apotropos who is appointed by Bezdin, as opposed to an unofficial apotropos who is fulfilling his apotropos position on a voluntary basis because the father asked him to do so during the father's lifetime. In the case of a formal appointed apotropos who has a chaloshem, he has a legal status, he's operating as the arm of Bezdin when he is nosei v'noten in any business dealings on the part of the Yisomim, and therefore he doesn't have to take a shvua according to Tanakama. But in the case of an unofficial apotropos who has no status, then at the end of his apotropsis, we need that he take a shvua to count and give an accounting for all these years that he served as an apotropos. Abba Shaul omer chiluf hadvarim. According to Abba Shaul, it's just the opposite. When a person voluntarily or informally plays the role of an apotropos, then we have to alleviate him of his responsibility to take a shvua, because otherwise, who's going to want to take upon himself this position and having to put his neck out on the line such that now we'll have to take a shvua. In those days, when they took a shvua, was a very serious business. But in the case of a shliach bezdin, meaning an apotropos that was formally appointed by bezdin, there he gains a lot because his reputation is enhanced by the fact that bezdin is relying on him, and therefore, since we don't have to motivate him by alleviating him of a shvua, he will take the shvua. The Gemara asks the following kasha: for a minute, we have a brisa that seems to contradict our Mishnah. In the Parsha of Shlichus, in Parsha Shlach, the Torah says, Atem, Gam Atem. And the Gam Atem is a ribui to include a shliach who now can serve as an agent or a proxy on behalf of the Bala Peiros to be mafresh Chumas and Maisros. But velo shutfin, a shutov, even though he's a partner, he has to be appointed explicitly by his partner in order to accomplish this goal of hafrashas Chumas and Mais on behalf of the shutov. Not only that, the word atem excludes even velo arisim. Arisim are sharecroppers who gain a profit in a certain percentage in the profits of the sudden. And you would think, therefore, they have like the status of representation and a proxy of the balabais. They can be mafresh truma shalomi daito. No, they have to be appointed by the balabais. Atem v'lo apotropsin. Even an apotropis cannot be mafresh truma from the peiros of these somim. And finally, atem v'lo atorem eshe'enu shalo. Somebody goes down to the field of his friend, and he thinks he's doing a great favor to his friend by being mafresh trumas and maisros, but he wasn't appointed as such. He's not an official shliach, and therefore he cannot be mafresh al she'enu shalo. Bailus is a precondition in Afrash's Truma. However, we see clearly from this brisa that the word atem excludes the apotropos, and yet our Mishnah says that the apotropos is chayav le'aser peroseim. How could that be? Rav Chizda can reconcile the Mishnah and the brisa. Lokasha kan lahachil v'kan laniach. There are two scenarios in which an apotropos would be mafresh trumos umaisus on behalf of the yisomim. One is in order to make sure that there's no tevel and there's no prohibition that would enjoin the yisomim from eating from the tvur. But in another case, there is a storehouse, and that would preserve the tvur. And let's say, for example, the yisomim are 12 and a half. You can already see their bar mitzvah date on the horizon. And now the apotropos wants in the brisa to take these peiros, and he wants to put them into an otzar, put them in storage, so that the yisomim, when they reach the age of bar mitzvah, will be able to be makayim personally, begufam, the mitzvah of hafrashas trumas and maisros. And therefore, if the apotropos can place the tvua into storage in such a way that it would facilitate the yisomim's ability to be mafresh trumas and maisros down the line, because the tvua is in storage. Maybe they had it in a cold place, like refrigeration, that would preserve the tvua. The Gemara now brings a raya from an explicit brisa to support Rav Chizda Tanya, as we learned in a brisa, apotropsin, tarmim umasrin lahachil v'lo laniach. They can be mafresh now, so that immediately the yisomim could partake of the peiros. But if it's laniach, meaning if there's a possibility that we could feed the yisomim now, there's no urgent need to be mafresh shumas and maisus, and the tvua, which is tevel, can be placed into long-term preservation, so that the yisomim themselves, when they reach gadlus, can be mafresh and be mekayim the mitzvah of afrosha. That's what has to be done. Umochrim lahem, the brisa continues, behema avodim ushvachos batim sodos ukramim lahach. If there's an urgent need to feed the yisomim, and there's no liquid assets to buy food and peiros to feed the yisomim, then even something like an eved, which is very precious, or for example, batamus sodos, and these are fields and homes If need be, if the urgency arises, then the apotropsim could sell even avodim and batim and sodos in order to feed these somim. Avalola niach, but if they want to convert the avodim and the batim and sodos into liquid assets by selling them on the market and take this money and put it in a bank, that we don't allow. We're always afraid that maybe I guess you could say in contemporary terms, the bank would go belly up, or maybe the money would be stolen, and therefore let's not mess around and convert the sodos and the avodim into liquid assets. However, mochrim lahem peros, yenos, shmonim, uslosos, lahachil avalo laniach. If, once again, there's a pressing need to feed the isomim and there's no money to be had, then we'll sell even less precious items like peros and yenos and shmonim and slosos in order to feed them. But if, on the other hand, we could take, and we have the luxury, the isomim are not starving, and take these objects and put them into preservation and not sell them, that's the best thing to do. You get the impression from this brisa that all the possessions of the somim, as a general rule, unless there's a dire, urgent need to the contrary, should be preserved as their possessions. And perhaps you could say that gives them a certain status, that they're owners of property, of avodim, they're owners of all sorts of foods and wines and oils. Let's not sell those properties and those possessions until it's absolutely necessary. Now, if you take a look here, we're talking about objects of mitzvah, lulav harava for the mitzvah of both daled minim ulkachtem lachem, and for the mitzvah of, which is really a minig neviim of chibur harava, or the mitzvah of taking the harava and doing circuits around the mizbeach, around the teva, and for sure tzitzis. I'm not sure why he doesn't mention tefillin. Maybe because tefillin is only when the child is about to be bar mitzvah. But why does the brisa add kol davar sheyesh lo kitzvah? And we'll explain what kitzvah means in a minute. Lasuye shofar. Whenever in the brisa, and likewise in the Mishnah, it says kol davar, it's a ribui to include something that you wouldn't have imagined. And in this case, the shofar, which is blown b'tzibur, in the Beis HaKnesses, why do we have to guarantee that these orphans will have their own shofar? But no, in event that the orphan will not be able to come to a shul, he'll have his own shofar to blow for the mitzvah of shofar. V'lokim lahem sefer Torah, tefillin umezuzas v'chol davar sheyesh lo kitzvah lasuye megil. Now we have tefillin that was left out before, and it's mentioned in the second category. Here we have a Sefer Torah, which l'chora is read in the tzibur, but no, we're talking about the mitzvah of owning a Sefer Torah, which is a personal obligation, and it's the 613th mitzvah of Taryag. And certainly mezuzos, in event that the Yisomim live in a house that need mezuzos. And what's the special chiddush of Megillah? Megillah is read publicly. And therefore, you might think there's no need to purchase a Megillah on behalf of the Yisomim. Kamashma, no. It is very possible that the Yisomim will not be able to get to a synagogue and be yotzei the mitzvah of Megillah b'tzibur. Therefore, they should own their own personal Megillah. The imposkim alem tzedakah. Now we get to the concept of davar she'ein lo kitzvah. Davar sheyesh lo kitzvah means we know exactly how much money is going to cost. And once that money is spent, there's no need to spend more money. But in the case of tzedakah, every time that there's a need and an ani comes around, then it's ein l'davar kitzvah. There's no end to how much tzedakah you can give, and it'll end up depleting the bank account of these somen. V'ein podim alem es hashvuyim. Likewise, to redeem the captives, it's a davar she'ein lo kitzvah. And now the Brisa adds v'lo kol davar she'ein lo kitzvah. What's the addition here? Lasuye tanchume avelin. Now, what financial expenditure is involved in tanchume avelin? So one answer might be what's called the sudas havra. When the ovel comes back from the burial of the dead and from the cemetery, we have to spend money on his behalf to feed him. And that special sudas havra. Let's say that the Yisomim own a field, a property that's very far away, and the apotropsim might be tempted to sell this faraway sadeh in order to purchase something that's closer to home, to buy a sadeh that's here, like we say, shehei nechasav krovim elav, krovim la'ir. But we can't do so because we very much want the Yisomim to maintain their ownership over the sadeh that they inherited from their father. Birav illegal biyafa. And we have to explain why, but the Bryce is telling us that if there's a sadeh that's not in good shape and its quality is inferior, now the apotropis would want to sell that field in order to take the funds from the purchase and invest it in a better field. They cannot do so. My taima, the dilma mishtadfin. We're always afraid that there might be a loss to a field, and it might be scorched by the sun, it might be attacked by pestilence, it might be inundated by a flood, and therefore for the apotropis to go ahead and make these calculations for the benefit of the Yisomim by selling a field, that we don't do. Because you never know, the field that they buy, that they purchase on behalf of the Yisomim to replace the original field might be destroyed. V'ein apotropsim rashoim limkar sados v'likach avodim. Even though an eved is very important and a person cherishes his eved, but nevertheless on the hierarchy, a sada is something that belongs to a family. And even for the sake of cashing in by selling the sada, for the sake of buying avodim, we're not allowing the apotropos to do so. Aval mochem avodim v'lochem lem sada. So according to Tanakama, we're going to allow the apotropos to sell avodim in order to upgrade to a sada. Rav Shimon Gamliel disagrees. The Omer, he says, af lo limkar avodim v'likol sados. Once again, we said that once you're messing around with a sadeh, you never know what's going to happen, what's going to be the fortune of that sadeh. And therefore, don't sell avodim even to upgrade, to take the monies and purchase a field. Because for dilma lo mashafyan, perhaps the sadeh will not last, and maybe it will be taken away by orarim. Maybe somebody's going to claim that there was a lien on that sadeh, and they'll confiscate it, and also the natural possibilities that might destroy a field. Now the question of the Brisa addresses is, can the apotropos stand as the representative of the Yisomim in Bezdin in any litigation? And the Brisa says, Ein apotropsin rashoim lodu. The apotropos cannot stand in front of the court and represent the Yisomim in a court case, not lachov and not lizkos b'nichsa Yisomim. Whether it might involve a claim against these somim or a claim against others on behalf of these somim. And the Gemara asks, Lizkos Hamai Lo. I understand that perhaps if there's a claim against the Yisomim, then by standing in Bezdin and representing the Yisomim, the Apotropos might put a danger for the Yisomim to lose a great deal of money. But Lizkos, if the Yisomim have a claim against someone else, wouldn't it be all in the benefit, in the best interest of the Yisomim for the Apotropos to represent them? Ella, but rather we have to rewrite the text of the Brisa. Lechov almanas lizkos b'nichsei Yisomim. Let's say, for example, the reason why the Apotropos is motivated to stand in front of Bezdin representing the Yisomim is because he is convinced that he'll be zocha for nichsei Yisomim. In other words, even though there's a claim against the Yisomim, and the Yisomim perhaps stand to lose, but the Apotropos is convinced that he has the ability to win the case and save money that's being claimed against the Yisomim. Nevertheless, no, he's not allowed to do so, because you never know what's going to happen with the end of this din, at the end of the litigation. And it could be that they'll lose the case. The Brisa continues, V'yein apotropsim rashoyim lahotzi avodim l'cheirus. The apotropos has to realize that the ownership over the eved is something that's very, very special and should not be selling avodim. But not only that, there's another issue here that's raised in the Rishonim, and that is the following. Let's say the avodim have money that belongs to them. Let's say others gave them money on the condition that it doesn't revert to the owner of the adon. So theoretically, the eved has the ability to redeem and free himself, but the apotropos cannot play that role of receiving those funds in order to free the eved. And the reason for that is because with regard to an eved, there's not only a dine momenos, but there's also what we call gufo shel eved. And the only individual who's capable of freeing an eved is he who owns the gufo shel eved. He can be meshachar the eved, but the apotropos doesn't own the gufo shel eved. Aval. But if, let's say, there's an urgent need for the Yisomim to have liquid assets in order to buy food or to buy a field, is mochen osan lacherim ve'acherim otzion osan lacherim. What we can do is a two-stage process. We can have others purchase the eved, and that removes the bailus momonis, the monetary ownership. And as far as the gufo shel eved, those buyers will be able, when time comes, to give a get shikha. This is all according to Tanakama. Rebbe rejects the Tanakama, Omer, and he says the following. Omer Ani, my opinion is that just like the apotropos is allowed to take money from acherim in order to sell the eved, and then the acherim will be meshachar the eved, afhu, even the eved himself, no sein dmei atzmo, he can take the monies that are his, and v'yotze, and he could free himself, mipnei shehu kimochro lo. In other words, the apotropos is not actually being meshachar the eved in this case, but rather, according to Rebbe, it's as if the apotropos was selling the eved to himself, and the eved now has the ability to be meshachar himself by paying this money. And therefore, Rebbe's of the opinion that the eved himself could pay, and the money is given to the apotropos, and he goes l'cheirus. Now, what happens at the end, at the termination of the administrative period of the apotropos, when the Yisomim are now independent, is we have here in the Brisa Machlokas Shin Tanakama Shimon. Tanakama says Sorach L'chashiv Imoy Bachronim. He has to give a reckoning, like an actuary, or a roeh cheshbon, right? Your personal accountant has to give a sheet that says, these were the assets and these were the deficits. But Shim Gamliel Omer Nitzara. He says that we can alleviate the apotropos of this responsibility. Then the Brisa wants to know who it qualifies to be an apotropos. Ein osin apotropsin noshim, women who are not usually involved in masu matan, v'avodim. We don't appoint an eved who's not trusted. He has no nemanus as an apotropos. Uktanim don't have das. However, if the father during his lifetime appointed one of the above, whether it's an isha, an eved, or a katan, then arishus biyado, then the halacha, the courts will recognize that minui, that appointment of an apotropos. Just want to take a minute break. Excuse me. Now the Gemara tells the following story. In Rabbi Meir's Gegid, there was an apotropos. The Havikom Mazbin Mizabin Arata Vizabin Avdi. He went ahead and sold karkos of Yisomim. He sold avodim. Of Vizabin Avodim means he took the money from the fields that he sold and he purchased avodim. V'lo shavke Rabbi Meir. Rabbi Meir objected. I'm not going to allow you to do so. Achvi le becholme. And from Shamayim, they showed him a dream. And as Rabbi Meir saw this dream, ani laros viato livnos. I am destroying and you are building. What does it mean? That the Shamayim decided that they want to be mafsid the nichse yisomim, and therefore don't inhibit the actions of the apotropos from selling karka, even if you think that'll cause a loss to the yisomim, because min Shamayim they decided ani laros. Filu lo eshkach omar tirei chalomas l'maylim v'lo morid. Rabbi Meir says, I'm not going to pay any attention to chalomos. We don't believe in dreams, and we don't paskin shilas against the halacha based on dreams. And this is something that seems to contradict many sugis and shas. For example, the Gemara says in Shabbos Daf Yud Aleph that if you have a bad dream, you have to fast, even on Shabbos. So the answer is, says the Tashbeitz about 6 centuries ago, that divrei chalomos are besuffic. We don't know exactly. There are maybe dreams that are true. And even the dreams that are true, there always has an admixture of dvarim b'telin. And therefore, as far as Mammon is concerned, we're not going to change the din based on a dream. However, as far as, let's say, your own bakashas rachamim and rachmi shamayim, we have to be choshesh besuffic that maybe the dream is true. Another story. Hani Bei Trey de Igrebu Satan. This little agadita that we're about to learn is about the midah of Hakaras Hatov. What do I mean? The presence of a Talmid Chacham has a tremendous impact on all those around him as far as shalom, as far as peace is concerned. And the story goes, Hanu Beitrei de Igribu Satan. There were two people that were always involved in an altercation, a fight. And the Satan was having a great time with them. On Friday, weekly, it was just like a minhag mokho that they would fight with each other. Ikla Rabbi Meir lahasam. Rabbi Meir heard about this tension between two Jews, and he decided, you know what, I'm going to stick around. I'm going to be in this mokho. And he remained there for 3 consecutive Fridays until finally they made peace amongst them. Shami Dika Omar, Rabbi Meir overhears the Satan, who's very, very upset with Rabbi Meir. Vaidi Afki Rabbi Meir Mahu Gavrami Bese. Rabbi Meir has thrown out, he's expelled that person from his home. Meaning, wherever there's machlokes, that's where the Satan finds himself at home. And if there's peace, then the Satan has to flee, he has to go away. So I mentioned Hakar Satov, but really we should go back to Parshas Korach. And what we learn from Parshas Korach is the severity of machlokes. Another story. So we're now in the neighborhood of Rabbi Yeshua ben Levi. He would sell karka, real estate, and buy with the monies oxen. To our surprise, Rabbi Yeshua ben Levi did not object. Why? Savralok Rabbi Yossi, the son of Rabbi Yossi, miyomai lo karasi lishti ishti l'shori shori el lishti basi l'shori sada. I'm going to prove, says Rabbi Yeshua ben Levi, from the statement of recording the price of Rabbi Yossi, how chaviv, how endeared it is, or how significant it is to own a shor. My wife I call Basi, and my shor I call Sadi. Because owning a field is worthless without a shor. It's the shor that does the avoda in the field. And therefore, Rabbi Yeshua ben Levi was not ma'akev. He did not object to the sale of karka for the purpose of buying shvarim, because ultimately the shor is equal in its status, in its chashivus, to the son. Another story. They relied on a grandma. So these Yisomim would rely on the grandma. Havili Torsa, and they owned a cow. Shakla, she took the cow, Uzvinta Nielu, and she sold the cow on their behalf. Asu Krovim Lekamid Rav Nachman, the relatives came in front of Rav Nachman to object. Amrulei, they said to Rav Nachman, Maya Vidita de Zavna. How does she have the right to sell the property of the Yisomim? She was not an officially appointed apotropos. Amalahu. Rav Nachman responded to the Krovim, Yisomim shesamchu etzel balabayis. Tanan, the Mishnah expands the status of an apotropos to include even someone who is not officially appointed, neither by the Bezdin nor by the father, but the Yisomim rely upon that person. It could be a balabayis, it could be anyone. Certainly it could be a grandma. So therefore they relied on the Savta, and that gives her a status, a quasi-status of an apotropos. So the Krovim come back again to complain for Yakin. this cow went up in value. All of a sudden, there was a great demand on cows. And now, as a result of the fact that the grandmother sold the cow, the Yisomim now took a financial loss. And once again, Rav Nachman goes back to argue against the crow. The buyer who purchased the cow, he's the one who gets the increment. He gets the benefit. But the mechira itself is valid. Krovim are not going to give up. Now they have a winning argument. What does this mean? Although, according to the general law, metaltalin niknim be-meshicha, and therefore the kinyan was absolutely binding the moment that they did a meshicha on the para. But nevertheless, if the money was not forthcoming and the purchaser did not give the money over to the savta, then Amar Lahu and Rav Nachman says in Cain, Hainu derav Chaniloi bar Idi Amar Shmuel, Tiomar Rav Chainoi bar Idi Amar Shmuel Nechasid Nichse Yisomim Arein Kehegdesh V'lo Mikni Ela B'Kasp. With regard to Hegdesh, the Torah specifies kesef, and only kesef. And therefore, if let's say a person wants to give something to Hegdesh, then the Torah says that that transaction must be effectuated by kesef. And Mashicha is not enough. And this is a sugya of Metzia Daf Mem Vav Hamid Beis and in Kiddushin Daf Chav Ches, that whether or not a Hegdesh is acquiring ownership from a Hedjot, or a Hedjot is acquiring ownership from Hegdesh, the pasuk says V'nosan HaKesef V'komlo. It's got to be kesef. The transaction is not effectuated and not validated without kesef. And the Chachamim made a takana that with regard to the Yisomim, we treat their property as if it were Hegdesh, and we upgrade the status of the Yisomim to that of Hegdesh, and therefore the kinyan is not valid through the normal mechanism of Mashicha, but rather we require kesef. And since the buyers had not transferred the money over to the Yisomim, therefore, now that it went up in value, the sale is invalid. Another story. Chamrei derabana ukva yasma. Chamrei means the wines of the Yisomim of Rav Ukva. Mashkua bi'arba arba. They made a meshicha, those who purchased these wines of the Yisomim from the apotropis, and each barrel of wine was sold for 4 zuz. The akeh, and following the sale, the market price of wine shot up. Become b'shita shita. Now for every chavis, you can get 6 zuzim. Now, once again, the buyers, although they did a mashiach on those 4 chavios of yayin, they hadn't yet paid the money. Also, the comment of Nachman, Amalahu, Hainu Rav Chaniloi, Bar Idiom Rav Chaniloi, Bar Idiom Shmuel, Nichse Yisom Arein Kehegdesh V'lo Mikni El B'Kasp. Since the buyers had not yet transferred the money, therefore the Yisom have a right to revoke the sale and sell it down the line for 6 instead of 4. Now, the sugya we're about to learn is that when we analyze Rabbi Chaniloi in terms of Nichse Yisom Arein Kehegdish, does it always apply? what happens if we apply this principle in a way that the Yisomim will suffer a loss? Mashuch peri miyasme, if the lokech who hadn't yet paid money, but he made a mashicha on the payros from the apotropis, and then the payros went up in value. Then we apply the principle of Rabbi Chaniloi that nichse yisomer kehegdesh, and the sale is not valid. We can revoke the sale, and now the yisomim could sell it at a higher price. However, zul, if the market value of payros after this mechira went down, and now it's the lokeach who wants to back out and revoke the sale, because now we can buy the same volume of payros at a cheaper price, then lo yekoach hejot chomer mihegdish. Here too, we will apply the principle of Rav Chaniloi. Why? Because obviously it's against the interest of the Yisomim to allow the lokeach to back out and revoke the sale, the transaction, because now the payros are worth less. However, amshichulu perili yasme iyaker, even though in a case where others gave the apotropis payros, and the apotropis is buying the payros on behalf of the Yisomim, there was a mashicha on the payros, iyaker, but now the payros went up in value. The money has not yet been transferred to the seller, and iyaker, and now the payros on the market went up in value. And now, of course, the mocher wants to back out of the deal, because if he revokes the sale, he could sell it at a higher price. No. At this point, since the Yisomim had not yet paid the most, lo yekoach hejot chomer mihegdish, which means the following. Just like if you sell something to a regular person, an ordinary person is called a hejot. Once the Mashiach was implemented, then the buyer could no longer back out of the deal. And therefore, in this case, against who wants to back out of the deal, let me just get the mathematics for a second. It went up in value. And of course, now what happens? Again, these right. So now the lokeach, the mocher wants to back out of the deal because he could sell it at a higher price. But there already was a mashiach. So we're going to give the Yisomim the benefit of both the status of Hegdesh and at the same time the status of Hejot. And therefore we're not going to allow the mocher to back out of the deal. And the Mashiach on the part of the Yisomim is going to be a clincher on the deal. However, Zol, now the value of the pairs went down, and therefore the Yisomim want to revoke this sale so that now we can buy pairs at a cheaper value. Sover Minei. Initially, the Bnei Yeshiva thought, Hainu Rav Chaniloi Bar Idi, let's apply the principle of Rav Chaniloi. Why? Because if we upgrade the status of the Yisomim to that of Hegdesh, and Mashiach is not Kona, and now the Yisomim want to back out of the deal because they can get payros at a cheaper price, let's equate the status of the Yisomim with that of Hegdesh. And therefore, since they didn't, there was no transfer of funds, it was only a Mashicha, the Mashicha is not Kona. And they can now back out of the deal. Rav Shisha Bered Ravidi, no. We're not going to apply the principle of Rav Chinoi in this case. Why? Because this principle, in this particular scenario, would work to the detriment of the Yisomim. Why is that so? Rahi lididhu. Why is this against the interest of the Yisomim? Because if we allow the Yisomim to be choser, then zimdidim itztarchi leperi, if they have to buy peros, right, which is the case that we're dealing with, v'leka diyoivlu adiyav zuzi. No one's going to be willing to sell them peros until they give them zuzim, because they realize that based on the principle of Chaniloi, the sale will not be valid without kesef, like it is in Hegdish. And therefore, no one's going to want to sell peros to the Yisomim without getting the cash. Because if it goes down in price and the value of peros decreases or depletes, then the Yisomim will invalidate the sale. And that's going to make it very difficult for the Yisomim to buy peros. Now, another case. Yove Yasme Zuzia Pere, the Yisomim gave most to others to buy peros, but they didn't do a Mashiach on the peros. And Zol, now the peros go down in value, and the Yisomim want to be choser, and they want to claim, hey, wait a minute, our status is not worse than that of a hedjot, and a hedjot is not kona metaltalin unless he gets Mashiach, unless there's Mashiach. And therefore, lo yeikoch hedjot chomer min hegdesh. And therefore, in the case of Zol, the Yisomim could back out of the deal, just like in the case of a hedjot, because there was no Mashiach. But Iyaker, if on the other hand the peros go up in value, and now it's the mocher who wants to back out of the deal because he can sell these same peros at a higher price. Sovamine, once again, the Bnei Yeshiva thought in their Havamina, Hainu de Rabbi Chenoi bar Idi, that we should apply the principle of Rabbi Chenoi and we should not allow the mocher to be choser bo. Why? Because he already paid most. One second. What does it mean? That in this case, the mocher wants to back out of the deal and cancel the deal because now he could sell it at a higher price. And we're going to apply the principle of Rav Chaniloi for the benefit of these Somim and say that these Somim were already kona with kesef, just like the kinyan in Hegdish is effectuated with kesef. Amalahu Rav Shisha Breder of Idi. No. This is going to be ultimately to the detriment of the Somim. Hara hi lididhu. Why? The asi lememer lahu nisrafu chitecha chitchem ba'aliyah. Let's say the peros were destroyed while they were still in the storehouse of the mocher. It's going to be now a hefsed of the Yisomim. Why? Because you're going to say that the Yisomim are already kona with kesef, and now their schora that they bought with kesef, their peros, went up in smoke.